In this session, we discuss how intersectionality, cultural identity, and mistakes all come together. Welcome to the AFTA podcast. I am Naveed Zamani and I am your host. In this session, I'm excited to be speaking with Dr. Manijeh Daneshpour. Dr. Manijeh Daneshpour is a system-wide couple and family therapy director and distinguished marriage and family therapy professor at Alliant International University in California. She's a licensed marriage and family therapist with nearly 3 decades of academic, research, and clinical experience. She is from Iran and identifies herself as a third-wave feminist. Dr. Daneshpour's main areas of research, publications, and presentations have centered on gender, multiculturalism, social justice, postmodernism, Muslim couple and family dynamics, third-wave feminism, and premarital and marital relationships. I'm very excited to have you back on this show, Dr. Daneshpour. And in this season of the podcast, I'm asking interviewees for a story about a time in their clinical practice that they feel that they failed and what they learned. And I'll turn it to you to start off wherever it makes sense.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here again with you and our audiences. In order for me to talk about my mistakes, and they have been plenty, I want to talk about the overall mistakes I have made in terms of my identity as an academician, and then consumer of research, researcher myself, and also clinician. That triple thread that Dr. David Olson, who was my advisor at University of Minnesota, used to say, a marriage and family therapist need to be a researcher, a teacher, and then a clinician. And so what I have noticed is that because of years of being in academia, one of my biggest mistakes overall with many of my sessions have been giving too much academic information as if I'm teaching. So psychoeducation, and then giving all kinds of research-related information to people when all they want to talk about is the pain and suffering of themselves. One person. And so I'm like, well, this makes sense in the bigger context. Let's zoom out. Let's look at all couples' relationships. Let's look at the pain and suffering of people. And so at times that has been very helpful and refreshing for clients that are a bit more sophisticated. They have been in therapy before. They have seen all kinds of different therapists. And so it's refreshing to come to someone who zooms out of their relationship and gives them a bit more information. But over time, I've noticed that that is not something that everyone appreciates. And I need to really be part of the process for people and sit with their pain as they're experiencing uniquely in their situation, in their context. And so I have worked on dialing back a bit in doing that, and have seen the result that it's more successful that way. The other part is I'm one of those people that gets focused on what I do. I remember was having a conversation with one of our faculty members when I when I became system-wide director, and was very overwhelming, new program, all these faculty. And she said, "How are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm overwhelmed." And she said, "Well, it seemed to like this kind of, being in these kinds of positions." And I said, I'm one of those people that if I'm going to be painting your office, I'm going to do everything possible that I do a good job. I get passionate about anything. If I'm cooking, if I'm cleaning, if I'm gardening, then I put all my efforts into it. And so in therapy, I put all my passion and efforts in the therapy room. And sometimes I've noticed that believing in people before them believing in themselves, it could be kind of intimidating. That telling people that, wow, of course you can do this. And then one of my the biggest areas of research and presentations and workshops have been on gender. I have a book on gender and social justice, the power of psychotherapy, that was published 2 years ago. And so I get into the conversation about gender dynamics and the ways that we have been all socialized in believing how men and women should behave. And so I get so passionate that, oh, of course you can be in a better place. And what I have noticed is that people are like, whoa, I'm not there yet. And you're way ahead of me. And so that has been, again, over the years, I've learned that it's good to be passionate. It's good to believe in people's ability to do well. At the same time, there is a timing and pacing that I need to be an emotional container first, and just try to sit and move forward with clients. And too much believing in them intimidates them. They don't believe in themselves the way I do, and so they become they back off. It's like, oh, I don't want to disappoint my therapist and not do what they're asking me to do. And so I've seen people not continue therapy, and I'm thinking, we were doing so well. How come you're not doing this anymore? And so over time, I had to realize that perhaps I was too much ahead of them, thinking that I have the passion, that I have to do this right, that I have to handle all aspects of their relationship, and they weren't there. So that's the overall mistake number 2. Number 3, I grew up in a family that we were very comfortable with conflicts, talking about them, calling people out, being comfortable, talking about unfairness. The model that I've always used is contextual therapy. It's about justice, trustworthiness, fairness, and so I call out unfairness. How is that fair? And then get into the conversation about fairness. And so I've noticed that me being comfortable with conflict and challenging people too soon is not fair. If I want to be a true contextual therapy, I have to really pay attention to those issues. That's overall mistakes that I have tried to work on myself and slow myself down.
Thank you so much for that rich sharing. So I have to admit, as you effectively went through each item, my heart rate increased because so much of it aligns with my own experiences, and you have me thinking about, ways that have and likely might be perpetrating the same thing. So is it okay if I kind of go through these 3 items and ask some questions? It's because number 1, I heard something about learning how to kind of dial back maybe the academic kind of research focused energies that you bring in with you, rightfully, right? That's your context and your education and the work that you do, and then how it is that you bring that in a way that's useful for clients. The second item I heard was kind of believing in people before they believe in themselves. And then the third one being that you have comfort with conflict and ways that comfort might intersect with a client's own relationship to conflict, which, I mean, you could be describing my family when you were sharing that piece. So if I could start with the first one, is that okay if I go through them? How did you like first notice that this is a problem, that like the language was going beyond what clients were wanting or comfortable with, or this educational piece was too prominent?
The many years ago, I, I only see a few because I've always been an administrator, so I'll see a few clients, and many actually of my of the work that I have done have been pro bono and volunteer work with people. So I've noticed that people are overwhelmed with the what I'm talking about, or what I bring up to the conversation, and so they even though I'm providing pro bono work, so it's not like they're paying and saying I'm not going to pay this person. They're not coming back to even do see me again, and I had to being from a country of many complexities, and also being Muslim, I always had this double consciousness, seeing myself from outside, and so that has helped me just kind of thinking I started recording myself and realized that the conversation is way too sophisticated for where the other person is.
Mm,
So I haven't had someone directly tell me this, but I even noticed that in supervision, when I'm supervising a doctoral student, soup of soup, in terms of becoming an AMFT approved supervisor, that I am thinking, let me just give you all layers of information about how to be a supervisor. Use theory this way, use research this way. And so I've seen their body language, although be, whoa, whoa, I don't know what you want me, or asking questions of them, and they just like, I don't know, you're so ahead of me. So
mm,
I don't have a moment of, I have specific examples about other areas of what I do, but there wasn't a critical incident
uh-huh.
that says, oh, don't do this anymore. I've just noticed that over time,
Yeah.
that it's not the best way to be open and welcoming to that. The other part of it is that for the past year and a half, I'm doing live sessions for our
Uh-huh.
students, and I see a client and then they join. And so at the end, after it ends, students are asking questions so they can get, because we have such a hard time, like any other program, for relational hours as part of an accredited program. And so I was just going to do this for one of our clinics for 5, 6 students, and just give them some observational relational hours. And then it became bigger and bigger. And now we have it. Many students are joining from all of our campuses in California and outside California. And so students asking me after the session ends, wow, Dr. Daneshpour, you were talking about gender dynamics, and then you shared these research studies with them. And I was like, oh, are they following you? Are they with you? And so I notice even now that I am thinking I'm so calm and so connected and not doing, students are still asking me. And so it has actually been so good for me to say, yes, I will come back to it next session and correct myself, or watch me, tell me if I'm doing that again. And of course, students have been so lovely and kind. And then they tell me
Good.
that we felt that that was too much, just kind of psychoeducation more than they could handle. So I don't have a critical incident to talk about.
Yeah, and it feels like I appreciate that. It seems like it's housed in a general ethic of, like you said, like being really passionate and committed to whatever you're doing and doing it well. And part of what comes with that is kind of like this learner mentality where, I don't know, I was just thinking as you're sharing, like, what a gift it is for these students to have their professor, supervisor, director model this lifelong practice of recording yourself, getting feedback, kind of continuing to work on your practice. That it's like kind of a never ending process. And so like having the capacity to even notice that, I think stands out to me. So you dialed it back by having students like in these live supervision contexts where you kind of directly position them to give you feedback as it's happening.
Yeah, and so when they take notes, and then when the session ends, I tell them what theories I used, why I challenged them here and didn't say anything there, and so we go through the whole episode basically together, the whole session together, and so I have asked them. I said, it was unsolicited at first. As somebody said, wow, when you were talking about that, I was like, are they following her or are they overwhelmed
Mm,
with what was happening? So the session after, I come back to clients and say, our students, as they were observing me, they were telling me that maybe I was talking a bit more than I should have about research and academic information. How did it sit with you? And how can I do that better? So stop me if I'm talking about something, ask questions so students can see that nobody's perfect. They can ask questions. I can make mistakes. And it has been such an humbling and useful process for me and students. We have learned so much from each other. And I tell the students that fresh perspectives, because some of them, their first semester, I didn't even
right,
think they should
right.
join. They haven't even started their practicum yet, and they decided to use this to just understand couples therapy, family
Mm,
therapy. They even give such good feedback about what were you thinking when you asked that question. You didn't notice the other person, and how upset they were. And so I'm even learning about those kind of things that we overlook.
so much gets learned in the teaching context. And I imagine this is different for you than me because so we both speak Farsi for listeners. I was not educated in Iran though, so I don't. There's two versions of the language. There's Ketabi, and then is it Amiyane,
Yes.
which is kind of like the street version, if I could use that word.
Yeah.
And so I only learned like the casual street version of the language. And so well, I've been working with Middle Eastern refugees for about 15 years. But the last 5 years, I would say like 95% of my practice is in Farsi, like Iranian Farsi going across to Afghan Dadi.
Mm-hmm.
And because of my own limitations, or like my lack of access to the Ketabi book form, Ketab means book, so it's a book form, academic form. Uh, I have to like simplify my language, if that makes sense, or not simplify. I just can't speak the way that I would in perhaps English. And so in English, as you're sharing, I'm like, I think I'm probably kind of prone to that in English, but my access to the language makes it different for me in Farsi.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I mean, and I actually have another problem when I'm working with people, because I learned how to become a psychotherapist in the US. And
Mm.
so all terminologies, how I explain something, I learned it in English. And so
Ah,
I have a hard time speaking Farsi and explaining the same concepts as coherently as I can explain them in English.
uh-huh.
And so, for example, if I'm doing an intake session with an Iranian family, I have to ask permission that when I'm talking about confidentiality and how we are mandatory reporters, I say I really need to talk about them in English because I'm more comfortable explaining it. I do a better job explaining it in English than in Farsi. So being multilingual and working with people from different cultures have those kinds of
Right.
nuances for both of
Yeah.
us in a different way.
Well, it's comforting to hear that. Yeah, because confidentiality has such a specific bureaucratic legacy, I think, in the US I haven't felt in Farsi at least.
Yes, very true. Very true.
Okay, can I go to the second item? So this one was believing in people before they believe in themselves can be intimidating. I was particularly drawn to this because, okay, um, how do I situate this? I'm thinking about some of the work I've done with some of my supervisees and trainees that I work with, and I kind of position more with a narrative solution focus therapy context. And it's interesting to see how sometimes the narrative ideas in solution focus too, like kind of get interpreted or kind of maybe applied as like I need to be very validating to my client. I need to kind of like this like language of like strength space. I'm always looking for strengths and I'm constantly seeking the exception, um, which are developmentally understandable positions to take with the theory. But I was kind of thinking about that as you're sharing this piece of like sitting there and being like, you're great. I love you. Well, you're amazing. You can do it. And the client, especially in the DV work, like domestic violence work, clients just being like, you're not really connected with what I'm telling you. So I was wondering if you, maybe I'll ask you a similar question. Like, was there a critical incident or was this also kind of like a groundswell of noticing this
Again,
kind of,
I remember someone who I've worked with off and on here and there, and I also use narrative more than solution. I had the privilege of being trained by Michael White when he was alive, and really I had a supervisor who was best friend of Michael, and we were doing co-therapy for an entire year, so been really embedded in narrative therapy perspective. And the idea of society really creates these dynamics, and then we fall into it,
right,
separating ourselves, all of that. So I was working with someone whom I had a pretty decent relationship, and was she was trying to place his father lived in another state and was going to be came to California, was living with them, and she was looking for a place for him, and was just kind of in the middle of figuring this out. And I said to her, you can do this. You can have your marriage, your relationship, how your father is being viewed by family living with you is not fair. And so she said, I found this place. I said, you can go, you can get that place, you can do the application, just being ahead of her. You can do this, you can do this. And at the end of the session, she said, I just don't see how I can do this.
mm,
And didn't continue with me after that. And so actually a few days ago, I was thinking about that person, and I thought, I was feeling, because I knew her, because she was a long-term therapist, because I knew her husband and we have done couples therapy, I was so worried about her relationship, their couplehood, how this is impacting the family. Mom was having an affair in another state. Dad came because of, I mean, it was just too complicated. And because I didn't want her to, because I knew her financial situation, didn't want her to pay for more sessions, I
yeah,
just packed everything in that session.
uh,
And I thought, okay, I can give her all of these ideas, and then she's sophisticated enough to go and figure them out. Perhaps maybe she couldn't after that, couldn't place her. I don't know what happened after that, but I thought, you know what? I wanted to not take her money, be so emotionally available to her. I was doing couples therapy with them, and this was a individual session of what I'm going to be doing with my dad, and so I got ahead of myself, and I
mm,
shouldn't have. I shouldn't have. I should have just listened to her panicking about what I'm going to be doing with my dad, as opposed to being so ahead of her and do problem solving that fast.
yeah. Wow, like I can't help but feel that it's such a familiar experience or something that there's a particular practice in managing that kind of state where in the interest to help someone and your like close connection to their experience and the suffering they're in, it like kind of creates a bit of an urgency to kind of really get in there and support them and kind of help relieve the suffering.
Yeah.
And it takes a particular practice that I'm a fairly sophisticated one, if it's fair to say, to notice that and slow down and just stay in one place or loiter, as a narrative therapist might say, like in a particular territory and stay close to what they're wanting. Because, and I'm saying that too from my own experience in the DV work, right? Like when violence is present, it creates a real sense of urgency.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, DV actually is a good area that sense of agency and people's pace when it comes to when I'm ready to shift, when I'm ready to think about the situation differently.
Right.
It's very much based on where they are, not where we want them to be. I mean, we may be thinking about safety, we may be thinking about immediacy, but they may not, and so it gets complicated that way as well.
Yeah, I love that story. Okay, can I go to number 3?
Mm-hmm.
This is where my like, yeah. Oh, well, all these I'm very excited to talk to you about, but this one like really caught my attention too for a couple of reasons. So you're talking about like family history and perhaps comfort of your own position with conflict.
Mm-hmm.
And that like perhaps at times you've been in context, and I don't know, I don't remember if you were speaking clinically, just clinically, or also like in your teaching context, but that your level of relationship to conflict can differ from the people you're talking to.
Yeah, but in this context, I'm talking about clinically.
Okay, yeah.
If I'm working with a family and I see dad is like being dismissive, I'm comfortable, calling that out and say, "Hey, you've been dismissive," and sometimes that used to backfire. Then the
Why
person
used to? What's different now?
because that's what I was talking about, the overall kind of self of the therapist working on that now I try to be way more careful when I am timing myself, pacing myself, when I am challenging someone. And actually in live sessions that I've been providing, people go, "Oh, he said that or she said that," and the person, and you why didn't you say something? And I say, well, it was. And then when people say, why didn't you? It actually is a compliment to me. I'm like, whoa, I've become better than watching myself. And then I explain. I say, well, I don't have that kind of a relationship with the person. I need to have more credibility. I don't have it yet. And so once I get there, then 3 sessions later, when I am actually challenging the person, then I tell a student, so remember the conversations you were telling me, well, he was mean, she was, said something, and I didn't say anything. Did you see me now that I said the same thing that you were thinking, I was thinking? And then I said, I remember when we did an intake session, this is what you said.
Yeah.
Then I'll talk about it. So, and there are times that students say, whoa, when you were challenging that person, I was getting so nervous for you. And I can't ever do that with a client and be that comfortable to say such a thing. And then I'm able to talk about developmental process of course, you're not going to be doing that in a session, and talk about how developmentally we are in different places, and we all used to watch Whitaker or Minuchin say something like get away with something so uncomfortable for us, and we were like, how are you doing that? Well, older men, psychiatrists, their intersectionality were allowing them to actually say what they wanted to say. And so I'm able to actually help students with those stages and say, I am doing this just to show you that you have to hold the person first emotionally, and then challenge them so they can hear you. But if you don't have a relationship with people and don't have credibility, it doesn't matter. So they say, you don't even have credibility at your age. I'm like, no, you need to earn credibility
Right.
over time. You can't just because you have been doing this, or you have gray hair, or your age is shows, think that, okay, I can now challenge people without having a friendly context for people to hear me.
Yeah. Yeah, as you're sharing, I was thinking about I do work with people harmed in domestic violence work, like domestic violence intervention programs and stuff. And we're actually at the time of this recording, so for people listening, it's August 2025. We're doing a training, it's called a batterers training, quote unquote, to use accounting language. And yeah, it's really interesting to notice one, well, the critical importance of the therapist's social locations and how they can respond. Because I'm thinking too, I don't know, I'll just speak anecdotally or experientially, part of the ways that I found usefulness in working with people who've harmed, you're kind of saying, is to go really slow, build the connection, build the trust, and within that relational connection is when you can start poking and prodding and bringing in challenges. And how, especially when I'm working with men, especially Middle Eastern men who've caused harm, what a privilege I hold in that the stories that they're telling me doesn't impact me the way it might like some of my colleagues who are Middle Eastern women, who are kind of like now sustaining a long history of this kind of language and this kind of violence in different forms. So I'm like able to be patient and listen to it and be like, okay, I'm going to bring this up at another time. Whereas in their kind of context, their heart rate is up and they're like, oh my God, I can't believe he's saying this. And this is bring back this long legacy that I'm familiar with.
Yeah.
And so even my own practice of being able to temper my speed is such a privileged one, at least in that context. But I don't know about you, but it feels like it also intersects with a cultural moment, particularly one shaped by social media in this kind of contemporary moment where you have to say something or you have to call out. There's a lot of cultural value on the call out, and especially the social media version of it, where you aren't relationally responsible for anything.
Mm-hmm.
You just get to walk away from it.
So I want to shift a bit, if that's okay, to talk about specifics of mistakes.
Yeah.
And that would be I when I started my journey to become a family therapist, I wasn't thinking that I'm going to become a cultural a voice for Muslims around the globe, and talking about relationships. But it was just, I was challenged that way in my doctoral program, saying, why do you wear hijab? What's going on? And so they asked me to talk about some aspects of who I was as a person. I mean, we're talking about very early 1991, 92, an intersectionality of who I was, which I didn't even know what it means. And so I became the person. We didn't have even cultural sensitivity courses. Became this person who was an expert as a student on culture. Right, everybody else was mainstream, and I'm this person who's going to talk about culture.
You
And
became the
so,
spokesperson.
I mean, totally. And then we had to publish a paper before defending our dissertation. I wrote a paper that wasn't published until 1998, believe it or not. It's a long story called a Muslim Family and Family Therapy on JMFT, that I talked about communication patterns and family dynamics and how to work with Muslim clients. And it's so ironic that out of all the things that I have done in the field for the past 30 years, every day get a citation from a Muslim family and family therapy at JMFT. I'm like, come on, somebody should have written, so many other papers should have been published since then. But still, it became part of my identity, even though I didn't even know. I was one person, and because of my background and my family, I was comfortable wearing hijab, being myself, thinking that women shouldn't be judged based on their outlook and how they look based on their brain. I used to make fun of, this doesn't cover my brain, it covers my bad hair days, and just kind of being very comfortable in that context. And so I thought, okay, I know Muslim families and Muslim culture and Muslim couples. And so I remember getting a couple referral when I was doing my internship at the doctoral level, that they were Muslim. And they were working with another therapist, a white therapist, and they were comfortable with working with that person. That person knew me and thought, no, I'm going to be totally multiculturally sensitive, and sent them to Manijeh. So they come in very reluctant because they were thinking that they may see me at the mosque, right? They will see me at a
You're part of the
baby shower.
community.
It's in Minnesota, very small community. And so when they asked for the appointment, they said, can you please not schedule any other Muslim before and after? We don't want anybody to see us.
Yeah.
And I was like, I didn't even know it was the first time I was having a Muslim client. And so when they came to see me, the husband was a PhD electrical engineering, and was working for a very, very famous firm in Minnesota. And the wife had a daycare center at home. And the issue was that the husband was saying, the money you're making from your daycare, we should save it for our retirement. And the wife was saying, no, it's my money. I'm earning it. I want to spend it however I want. And so to me, it was over finances. So they could have continued with the therapist without being referred to me. But somehow the person thought that there is that multicultural aspect of it. And to be fair, the wife was saying in Quran, it says that if a woman makes money and shares it with her husband, is sadaqah, it's charity. Right. And then I think the therapist got overwhelmed of like, I don't know anything about this. And so I could understand that part, that yes, that is a concept we have in Islam. And so what happened was, I thought, I know, then I'm an expert because everybody else thinks I'm an expert. But Naveed, I have made majority of my mistakes with Muslim families, not with mainstream culture, because of my Western training and Western gaze. That I'm an insider, but looking at these families and couples from an outside, from that Western training that I got. And so I remember I told the husband, the husband says, I don't know why my wife is behaving this way. We used to share, everything, all conversations and decisions. And now she says, no, I'm not going to agree with you on this one. I don't know what happened. And so I said, well, there seems to be a paradigm shift. Developmentally, they had 4 kids and boys, and they were grown up. And I said, when women have they have sons and they are much older, they think, okay, the balance is different now, so I can rely on my sons. And sons were challenging that. So I used the word paradigm shift. I said, oh, there seems to be a paradigm shift. He's a PhD, I'm a PhD. And the wife looked at me and looked at the husband and said, oh, 2 intellectuals using words that I don't even understand, her Arabic in English, I mean, her English was very basic, and I don't speak Arabic. So she said, I don't want to continue therapy with you because of because I don't think you understand what's going on. And she got stuck. I was actually on her side trying to explain the situation to the husband, but overusing this intellectual words that she didn't understand, I lost her.
Yeah, yeah.
So in order to get her back, right, I'm just like thinking, what should I do? I said, oh, I'm sorry. You know what I'm thinking? I'm thinking we should have a session, just you and I, and chit chat about issues. Meaning, I brought myself down from paradigm shift. All of a sudden, I said
Chit
chit
chat.
chat, and she looked at me and she said, chit chat? I don't need to chit chat with you. I have friends that I can chit chat with.
Ooh, too far down.
I'm here so you can help us with
Oh my
our
gosh.
relationship.
Those are challenging dynamics.
It has been about 30 years since that, 31 year now. I think every fall semester that I teach family therapy one, because I only teach a class a year, I talk about this mistake. And I say, I will never forget how badly I handled both when I was too sophisticated and then when I decided to be not sophisticated
Kind
and
of like overcorrected.
just overcorrecting.
Yeah.
And so, um,
It's sorry.
and in other, I mean, other instances with um, Muslim clients, I have made mistakes again, having that colonial perspective about them, and realize that they have internalized racism, see themselves less than often, right? It's in within the culture that we have here, and then I get into protecting them. No, don't hate yourself too much, because they say, in Muslim culture, men, I mean, they're thinking that we are together in this. And then I try to correct them and go, believe me, this is not just a Muslim family issue. It's a family issue.
Yeah.
The dynamics with gender, the dynamics with power, the dynamics with decision making, misunderstanding is not just you. And then I I may lose them, right? Because they're not interested in hearing Christian families have the same issues. They're stuck with their family.
Right,
So
right.
again, zooming out and trying to get them to understand the bigger picture, they're like, I just want to know what to do with my own family.
Yeah, that story so beautifully exemplifies all like the points you had hit on today. And then like, I don't know, just the artfulness of finding the right timing and the precise words, kind of adjusting and adapting to the client in front of you and what their needs are, especially when you're doing like couples work and there's multiple kind of positions that folks are taking. And I really appreciate this piece that you're saying to Manijeh John about the ways, and edit me if I misrepresent anything, that in particular multilingual and multicultural therapists are really prone, especially through our education, to perpetrate colonial ideologies and kind of interventions and kind of, yeah, put on a colonial set of mentalities onto our clients as the best or most sophisticated or correct way to approach something.
Yes. And that gets us in the therapy room. It is good to go macro and look at the much bigger perspective, but there is something about human pain that cannot be explained by sophisticated research perspectives.
Right.
And we have to just be there and be emotionally available and hear every sentence the way they want to talk about and process, and then be gentle and understanding about giving them a bit more information outside of what they know, which is I have seen, I think, I have to say that I have been helpful in taking people from micro to macro level,
For
and
sure.
it's very useful approach,
For
but
sure.
the balance and the gentleness
Yes.
is very important. My other book called Family Therapy with Muslims came out of actually people saying we don't know how to work with Muslim couples and family. When my article came out, Bill Doherty, who was my advisor at the University of Minnesota, called me and said, "Psychotherapy Networker is interested in interviewing you about this article you wrote and that was published in JMFT." And so just want to tell you. And so Gary Cooper was in charge of Psychotherapy Network and magazine at that time. So he called me and introduced himself. And he said, "I just have one question for you. I read your article. And that is, what do you want me to do when a couple comes to my office and they're Muslim and the woman is depressed because her husband is oppressing her? How do you
Mhm.
want me to work with them?" And I said, "You need to work with them like you work with any other couple, that there
Right.
are power differences, and one person is using that level of power to get the other person to be upset and depressed or anxious." So I said, "So you have never, only Muslim families that you have never worked with?" That's the confrontational part of me that came out. I said, "So all these years that you have been providing therapy, you have never seen a power dynamic in relationships. So you're only gonna, if you ever work with a Muslim couples, you're gonna see it."
Yeah.
And so that has been part of what I wanted to advocate. So when clients said, Iranian culture, Arab culture, Muslim culture, and then they put themselves down, then that passion that I have
Yeah.
about getting people to believe in themselves, that's why I talked about overall and then the specifics, then gets me to say, no, 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 this is not about you. Please don't see yourself that way, because that self-fulfilling prophecy is going to hurt you, and you're going to see only your relationship in this light, as opposed to seeing communication is important, power dynamics are important. The other thing that I have noticed is that I'm much gentler on my Christian couples when it comes to their belief systems.
Mm.
I won't challenge them as much as I challenge Muslims about things that I'm like, why? That's your internalized racism that you think that you should be more confrontational when it comes to belief system. People have belief systems, and we need to understand them and challenge them if we think they're not helpful, in a much gentler way with anybody that comes to our offices. So that double consciousness hopefully has helped me in seeing myself from outside, and just kind of sit with those aspects of who I am and take corrective measures.
Yeah. Gosh, so much resonance in your stories. I mean, this piece about how family dynamics and stories can get really filtered through a pretty propagandized set of interpretations is very familiar to me. I'm also very familiar with this piece that you're sharing. Well, it's my experience too that like we tend to, how do I say it, like critique or judge people within our communities more harshly. Like, I don't know, just personally, some of my most challenging students in the past have been like Iranian ones.
Absolutely.
Um,
Me too.
yeah,
And people from outside of us don't understand. With faculty, the Iranian faculty or Iranian students is like, aren't you two from the same?
yeah,
You know? Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
it's hard to explain what
It
happened.
is hard to explain. I also I want to be mindful of time because I could just keep going on forever, in all the ways that you made me think about different moments and stories. But I was thinking about, yeah, I was just thinking about this client that I had. It was like a mother-daughter. They but had both sustained a ton of abuse from various men in their lives. And long story short, I was meeting with the mom, one-on-one in this one particular session, and she was sharing a story about how she was interacting with her daughter, and by my interpretation, was taking patriarchal notions of body image and how women should be, and kind of placing it on her daughter. And in my mind, I'm like, oh, especially like my excitement to get into the socio-political, I'm like, oh, I see it. It's a gendered thing. And I forget how I said it, but I basically jumped to that.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget the way she looked at me. She's like, what are you talking about? Like, that's nothing to do with it. Like, listen to what I'm telling you. You're just going, I don't know what you're talking about.
Stay with me. Yeah.
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 Yeah. So I felt like a lot of resonance in then how I jumped to that.
Yeah.
And I'll just say this too, really quick as we're wrapping up. It was my own research too. I did some research on how do couples therapists make decisions when they're confronted with couples in violence or high conflict. And one of the things that I discovered was that the clinician's own personal history of conflict in their family had huge influence on how they would make determinations of if what they were observing in front of them was violence or abuse, or above the threshold of what was appropriate for couples counseling.
Yeah. The other part of it is that what I have noticed is that when people know about someone's background, their intervention fluctuates. So I do this experiment in class. I tell a story about a client, a couple. I said, yeah, the husband was like emotionally abusive, not available for the wife and the family, and this and this and this and that. Right. I tell the story. I say, oh, yeah. And then I add, oh, yeah, by the way, it's a Muslim family. Immediately, students' reactions to what the intervention should be changes. And so I'm like, how did it change? Well, now you're talking about I'm like, why? I told you the story about what is happening within that context. Why is it that we are more forgiving when it comes to mainstream culture as opposed to a Muslim family, a Black family? I mean, there are variations that I try. I just do my own experiment.
Yeah.
Research gathering in class by just talking about something and then adding an intersectional piece, and all of a sudden students change the way they're going to be approaching it. Why is she still in that relationship? Why doesn't she get out? What, do you have divorce in Muslim family? I mean, it goes completely different way, even though the issue is violence,
right,
and not being emotionally available to the other person.
Right. Oh, thank you so much, Manager John, for just, I don't know, it stands out to me, or I can imagine just how much not only your students are learning from you, but you're also learning from your students, and kind of like the rich discussions that you're all in. And so thank you for your contributions to our field and incoming therapists. Kind of as we're wrapping up, if it's okay to ask, if folks want to connect with you or kind of follow your work, is there some place that you would send them to, like the books you've read?
Yeah, I have a website, drmanijehdaneshpour.org, that has all my writings and books and papers, and they can have access. It's a bit about me, how I've always tried to be a bridge between Eastern and Western culture, and train therapists in the Western culture to work with Easterners, and vice versa, helping Easterners learn how to work with Western clients.
Beautiful.
And so, and my email address is the university email address, and people can get hold of me.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. خیلی متشکرم.
Bye.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.